Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. This is going to be a bit of a shorter video. I'm going to try to cover creating a two-dimensional cockpit panel in PlaneMaker. Most of you will we're either going to give you a pre-made one to use on your fighters, or you'll just need to make a few very simple instruments for your test pilots so they can fly your aircraft properly. But I'm just going to go over kind of the interface of the panel editor because it's quite different from PlaneMaker, and yeah, so that's what this video is going to be. So without further ado, let's get started. Right, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is obviously open up my aircraft. This one, at this point, we've added an engine, we've added landing gear, we've added everything else we need. This is a perfectly flyable aircraft as it is, but we don't have any instruments, and instruments, if you're unaware, are kind of useful for when you're flying around because, you know, they tell you interesting information that is quite important. So the first thing we need to do is to go into the viewpoint tab, and down in this section here we can change the type of our cockpit. So obviously each of these is going to be corresponding to what type of aircraft it is. The IFR ones are scooched up a bit more, so there's more room for you to stare your instruments, so you don't have to worry about looking out your windows. This is a fighter. We want a fighter cockpit. And we'll go into the rest of this later, but for now that's all you need to do for a cockpit. And so to edit your panel, you want to go to Standard, Panel 2D, not 3D. I'll talk about why later, but 2D is easier to work with and much less complicated to figure out. So this is the view you see when you open the panel editor. So on this side you have your instrument list, which is a whole bunch of nested drop-down menus. You have a preview of your instrument, it'll give you a little description, and that's all you really need to worry about. Now up at the top, you have a button to save your entire aircraft while you're working. You have this button, which we'll talk about in a bit, and then undo, redo, cut, copy, paste. And then this is the delete button, which you can also use backspace once you've selected an instrument. Don't worry about this button, and then the rest of these none of you will ever need to worry about. So most of you, if you are making an aircraft from scratch, will be importing the instrument layout of another aircraft. And if that's all you're here for, I'm just going to show you how to do that right away. This button allows you to import another aircraft's 2D panel. It's very simple, you just click on it, you navigate to the aircraft you want to import a panel from. For me, I'll just do, I have a massive aircraft library, I'm just going to choose the F-14. So what you need to do is you need to select whatever aircraft you're importing a panel from, just like you would be opening it. So select the ACF, and open, and then poof, now suddenly I've got a full 2D panel. I'm going to also show you how to make kind of a very basic thing for your test pilots to use here, so I'm just going to undo everything there with the undo button. So what I do normally, if I'm just testing an aircraft, I want to fly it around like just for a bit and get an idea of how it's flying and then make some changes in PlaneMaker, is I will just, like, at the very bare minimum, I'll make a heads-up display. Just because they're really easy to work with when you're flying. They give you basically all of the important information you need to know to keep your aircraft going, just right in your line of sight. So just kind of as an example of how this entire interface works for creating instruments, I'm going to show you how to make a heads-up display. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up the HUD drop-down menu by clicking on this little arrow, and then you get a whole bunch of things, whole bunch of different instruments here that all end in .png. So the interface is very, very simple for adding an instrument. You just click on the one you want, and then you just drag and drop it onto where you want it to go. So for a heads-up display, at the very bare minimum, or what I usually do is I say I want an artificial horizon, so you have a little description here, And you can either drag from here, or you can drag from the preview. I just do it from here, it's just what I do. And then you drag, and then you drop it on. And so where you can put instruments on your heads-up display is defined by some secret arcane magical property somewhere deep in the X-Plane configuration files that I don't know how to change at the moment. So just drag your heads-up display components into the heads-up display area on the panel. So the artificial horizon is kind of like the attitude indicator in a general aviation aircraft, except it gives you a path vector indicator, which is very useful. It also includes a compass, and then it gives you pitch degree markings and a little, I think, somewhat bank angle indicator here. Yeah, okay, so the next thing you're going to want is airspeed and altitude. So these are just little tapes that sit on the side of your heads-up display and tell you how high you are and how fast you're going. Altitude and airspeed, so there we go. And if you've ever worked in Microsoft Word before, which I really hope you have, things can be aligned with each other the same way they are in programs like that. So you got these little lines indicating that you're all lined up. If you're finding something doesn't fit where you want it to, you can also adjust the size down here in this little box that has size as a ratio of the normal size of the instrument. So I'm going to make this be 90% of its normal size, just to show you what that looks like. If you care about realism, you can do this. I really just kind of throw everything on here and make sure it is all there for my heads-up displays when I'm just test flying. So this is what you would want at the very bare minimum. This would allow the pilot to fly the plane, be aware of how fast and how high they're going and roughly where they're pointing. If you want more detailed information about how your flight's going, I would add a couple more things. So I'm just going to drag them on and we'll talk about briefly what they do. So I usually want an angled attack indicator. This is like very useful if you're testing super maneuverability, you're trying to pull a high AOA maneuver. Also good to look at if you're about to stall. If you've got a tail hook, it's nice to know when it's deployed, so I usually put one right here if I've got one of those. So that's hook, resting gear. It's also nice to see where your flaps are positioned, so flaps, it's nice to see your fuel quantity right here, fuel, and then it's also very nice to see the G-force on your aircraft, so I'm going to keep that up here by AOA. Ground speed, I don't usually tend to add. Horizontal situation indicator is useful if you're trying to use radio navigation, although for just test flying, I don't really bother. I do definitely want a Mach number on here, just so I can have a better idea of how fast I'm going relative to the speed of sound. And then if I want to shoot down other aircraft for whatever reason, I'm going to want a traffic radar. And if I'm testing weapons, it's nice to have one of these. Last two things that I would really recommend having are, three. Radio altimeter, so this tells you how high you are relative to the ground once you're within a certain distance of the ground. Speed brake position indicator. And last but not least, a vertical velocity. I'm gonna move my radio altimeter up a bit, and I'm gonna keep this right above altitude. And there you go, that's a basic heads-up display. This is kind of the bare minimum of instruments I'd recommend for kind of more in-depth, just basic test flying, as opposed to just like seeing if your aircraft can get off the ground. And the rest of these instruments, there are a lot of instruments in here. I'm not going to cover all of them, just because none of you really will ever need to add them yourself. But if you are interested in making like an actual properly fleshed out 2D panel, just come on over to the office hours on a Friday and I can help you out with that. One thing I didn't cover, if you want to delete an instrument, I'm just going to drag on this. So this is the heads-up display instrument for an airliner, so it's just this panel that you can drag instruments onto. We've already got a heads-up display, so we don't need this. To delete, either press this button or backspace, and that's that. If you want to precisely position something, you can also use arrow keys. I found that just dragging and dropping stuff is just fine, because you can align them with other instruments pretty easily. And yes, you can zoom out and zoom in with your scroll wheel. You can drag your view around with the right mouse button. And yeah, that's about it. So, pretty short video. Hope you found this helpful. If you need help with anything else, as always, please come over to office hours and we'll try our very best to help you. So yeah, good luck with your aircraft, and I will see you in the next one.